here is a tweet from Ross Dellinger earlier today, SI.com, and this is rather interesting. Remember when what many of our guests have said, and leave that up, Garrett, for a little bit, please, how the NFL has basically taken away almost the entire month of December from college football. So how do you battle that? You surely can't compete with them. They probably will eventually move that national championship game away from Monday night because the NFL playoffs get all the attention. How about this idea? The commissioners, the NCAA commissioners, proposing a 365-day football calendar and calling, now this doesn't mean it's going to happen, but they'll discuss it even more, maybe vote on it, an earlier start to the season. Shift up the bowls, pushes back early signing date, permits off-campus contact with juniors, creates new dead periods per documents obtained by SI now.
I think it's going to be necessary when you expand the playoff and you want to find a way to highlight what you're doing there against the NFL. You've already let them take over Saturdays in December for the NFL playoffs. So you've kind of lost that day unless you want to counter program at different times of the day, which may not be the wisest thing to do. So you need to find a way to own what you can in December and own what you can throughout the year. So pushing up the calendar and making it also probably more practical and realistic for the function of college football is necessary, more so than it would be groundbreaking because, you know, there's so many things that have happened. You just have to accommodate for it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot to unpack from it. It's not just simple, oh, let's just start earlier and everything stays the same. I mean, there's a lot that would change as a result of this. The week zero part of this, opening that up to more teams is interesting. And something's going to have to give because even though you've got the month of December to spread out your bowl games, if you're going to have an expanded playoff, you're going to have some room to fit some stuff in. You can't just let's just start a week earlier and everything stays the same. No, there's going to be some other twists to it. So this is a proposal. This is by no means finished. I'm sure there's some tweaking still left to do. I'm not at all opposed to an earlier start. I do think it was kind of funky to have a week zero, and it's like an unofficial beginning, and you have like 14 games or whatever it was, 14 teams or 14 games, and it's like nobody's really acknowledging you're acknowledging college football starts, but we're all saying it's not really official until the next week. It's just kind of weird to me. So, yeah, just going ahead and bumping that up for everybody seems to make some sense. But, yeah, I mean, how is the playoff calendar, involved in this? I do like the idea that you maybe have some more breathing room for teams. You're not just on this grind of, 14 games and, 15 weeks of the regular season. You'd have, I think, an extra open week. So I think that could potentially be good for teams. And that would also address the health aspect of, what I think is going to be a major question when you start talking about all the money that's going to be flowing and the expanded playoffs and all the stuff for the athletes. I think, you're probably going to want to give them, if they're playing more football, or some teams are, a little bit more breathing room as well to heal up and whatnot. So I think that would be beneficial. But, need to see more of kind of every in and out of this thing.
I got a question. We hear about this playoff going to 12, whenever that happens. We're talking about 4 extra games. It's 1 week. And so it's not like there's 16 new games. There's 4 new games. Now, again, 4 teams get a bye, it's a bye. It's basically is a bye, not an off week. It's a bye because you're advancing. But it's not like there's a full schedule. There's 4 new games. I think they could figure it out. And also, please don't use week 0. The state of Texas did that in high school football for, Garrett, ever?
Yeah, it's been a while.
The games that were played in late August, they called them week 0. Call it week 1. And then it's week 2. And week 0, I think earlier this year I even heard that in college football, that Nebraska-Northwestern game.
That was week 0.
Yeah, and just week 1.
That's what we're talking about. Yeah. That's the unofficial start that they never really said, this is the official start. And I just said there's, a handful of games being played, and it's like college football's back, but not really, not till next week. And that's silly. And that's what I was saying, is it was silly to have that to be officially the start and not really take advantage of that. I don't know why. Don't mind that they're playing games in Ireland. Let's not make a huge deal out of this. Let's wait till next week when everybody else is playing. That doesn't make sense. And my thing with the playoff is, it's 4 additional games, but I think Dellinger pointed out in his piece, and I've seen some other scuttlebutt about it, is, look at the month of December. What's the first week? You got conference championship games. What's after that? You got either bowl prep or you got, playoff prep or whatever, and now you're going to add some more games to it. Now, granted, it's only a couple more games in the long run for a handful of teams, but that's a tight turnaround. Like, there's no give. Like, you start in June or July or whatever. You go full bore basically all the way to August. Then you really get going. Then you go on all this travel. Now you're going to have expanded conferences where you're not just traveling anymore to, like, the state over. Now you got USC going to Michigan for conference games, you know? Then it's full bore, 14 out of the 15 weeks you're playing a game. Or is that right? Yeah, 14 out of 15. And then you have one break in all of that. You have 1 week to catch your breath. And then conference championship games for those who are lucky, and then turn around and there's bowl games right then. So I just think that, you know, if you can create a little bit more freedom of movement within that schedule and a little bit more of a breather, even if it's just a slight pocket, I think that's beneficial to spread out the schedule a little bit more as opposed to just trying to cram it all in this September through December, and we got to get it all done in this time frame. If you want to be the big bad sport that you appear you want to be, I think you're going to have to do more of a year-round concept.
All right, Chris, how does this affect the playoff expansion, affect bowl games? Listen, there's 4 new games. There's 7 games. 4, 2, there's 4 and then 2 and then 1. And it's the same thing. Am I right here?
Yeah, because they will.
So there's 7 games.
Home sites for
they'll
the first
rotate them around, and certain ones will still be a part of it. Go ahead.
Well, they're going to move the bowl games up under this proposal by a week.
Yeah, and so bowls are still going to get the other bowls that are not a part of the playoff games, the 7 games. They'll still have their thing and their sponsors, and maybe they'll become important again. I don't know, because it seems like there's just too many bowl games, unless you're a team that hasn't been to one in a while, and it's great to get back into it.
I'd like to piggyback off of too many bowl games. So, Chris, I will answer your question with a question. Who gives a crap what happens to the Popeyes Bahama Bowl?
You know who does, though, Paul?
Those teams, but like...
Yeah, but if you're Baylor in 2010 and you have not been to a bowl game in 16 years, and remember the excitement when they clinched a win against Kansas State that made them bowl eligible. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, it was joyous.
I don't pretend like they weren't celebrating a Holiday Bowl around here a few years ago as though it was the freaking national championship game.
I mean, you could hear the locker room out of state.
I'm thinking about teams like that, or SMU after so many years.
The majority of college football.
Yeah.
But if they still play it, who gives a crap where it is? Like, that's my thing. If they're still going to play the game, how is it going to suffer from no one being able to go when you're fans, or just the teams being there? If they're still getting to play in the game, who cares if it's on December 7th or December 25th?
And
who cares?
They also
they won't suffer.
They buttonholed like this 1 week or so. They do need to spread those out and play them immediately right after maybe the championship games in early December. I don't know.
As for the questions about who cares, I mean, the NFL has a whole show about their schedule release. I think it's kind of silly, but there's guys out there and gals out there that care about who their November opponents are and when they are and where they are and all of that. And look, I'm not Mr. Bowl Game. I don't care about the Boca Raton Bowl. It's on at like 3 o'clock here. It's silly. It doesn't feel right at all. It feels disjointed to be a part of the bowl schedule. But, hey, for those teams that are in the Boca Raton Bowl, that might be a big deal for them. And if we don't care, that's fine, but the fan bases do care.
So do the sponsors.
And so do and I agree. There's too many bowl games. So how do they suffer? Perhaps they get shaved a little bit, and that wouldn't be a bad thing. But suffer other than that, I think it's just simply a move on the calendar. I don't think it's a suffering. Like, to Paul's point, I agree. There's no suffering here. But there might be, perhaps a dialing back of a couple games since you'll have more teams in the playoff. But, I think pretty much that will remain sort of status quo. You might just see games starting like the week right after the regular season wraps, as opposed to a little bit of a buffer period.
You get extra. You know who else cares? Not just the programs if they break a bowl streak or whatever. There are like 15 extra practices.
Here you go. And another proposed change.
So there's a lot of reasons. Yeah, there's a
bowl
lot of
games
reasons.
would be permitted to start the second Saturday in December, a week earlier than normal.
Yeah,
and that's,
and here's the other thing. I should say that.
And I'm not saying I watch them.
No,
I'm not. I'm
the
just
bowl
saying
games will all benefit if college football gets behind and says, how do we own December?
Yeah.
Well, you can, starting in that second Saturday, you can play a game on Saturday, you can play a game on Monday, you can play a game on Tuesday, you can play a game on Wednesday, and just go straight through the month. And every day of December and the early part of January, there's a college football game.
Yeah. Dennis, by the way, makes this comment. Does the panel, maybe it's even us, but the panel that's putting together the college football playoff, Do they understand that campuses are pretty much unpopulated for majority of December?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
It really is a great question because, we just talk about it as though it's like a game in October and everybody's just going to – I mean, like if there was a playoff game in Ames, Iowa, I know everybody would show up. But I think, you could probably say that pretty much anywhere except for L.A. maybe, that if there's a playoff game, at least early on, the uniqueness of that, I think the students are coming back for that bad boy, or they're sticking around campus. Like I knew plenty of people that would just stick around campus because of their family situation or they live too far away or whatever that may be. I know you won't have enough that necessarily do that, but I think, who are we talking about hosting games? We're not talking about like Charleston Southern probably hosting games or Coastal Carolina or teams like that.
You're thinking about maybe Wisconsin or...
And I think those fan bases are big enough that they're going to bring enough people to watch an on-campus playoff game against another big banger of a team. Like I think you'll be fine there.
Could be Austin, could be Waco, could be Tuscaloosa.
But it's a great question because there is a mass exodus around that holiday period where about 20,000 or tens of thousands, depending on what town you're talking about, just disappear for about a month. So that's an interesting question on the timing.
My question on whether it will work in certain towns would be if you play your rivalry game after Thanksgiving, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Is your stadium sold out for that rivalry game? So, like when Nebraska and Oklahoma played that game.
We're not supposed to bring them up anymore.
No, but when they played that game, were the students back? Did they come back for that game, or did they stay home eating turkey?
No, that place was packed. Yeah, whether it's in Norman or Lincoln.
So, if the game matters, it's not like you're playing your non-conference game after then. You're playing a playoff game. So, if you're playing a first-round playoff game, and it's Michigan versus Miami, in the big house is going to be full.
Yeah.
Now,
maybe not in Miami, though.
If it's Michigan versus Miami in Miami, maybe that would be the one thing to get them full.
From Mike, I lived in a city with a bowl game for 3.5 years. The businesses around the stadium for the famous Idaho Potato Bowl in Boise brings in a bunch of money for that week. So there really are reasons, and you may look at the stands and there's 22,000 instead of what would be, but I think every bowl game, whether it's players or programs or sponsors or whoever, even fan bases, but the part about, will I watch them all? No, there was a time I did, back when there was 1/3 the number of bowl games.
I think we can all agree that it's gotten watered down.
But,
it got watered down when you started adding like the Boca Raton Bowl, and then you look at the first year, and it felt like there's 35 people there, and they just like stumbled upon a football game. They didn't even realize it was there. That's kind of what it felt like from what I remember. But as much as it got watered down a little bit. Again, maybe they shave a couple of them off or a couple go to the wayside, but you have an excellent point. Like for these bowl organizers and whatnot, some of it can be viewed as just basically a money grab, I think, for some of them. But for others, it's a big pipeline for the community to pump some money into, Boise, Idaho, or to, I was about to say Las Vegas, not that they really need help, but you get the point of these bowl games.
If Miami hosted Michigan, as David M. said, Michiganders have a chance to go Miami in December. That place would be filled. Also from, let's see.
I think that's going to be so cool.
Remember that TCU, when they played in the Rose Bowl, big boy, this is it. That's a massive house. They were there in full force for a game like that. We've seen Baylor do that. Not all. They're a small private school, 17,000 or 20,000 students. There are some that eventually you won't run out of gas just because of numbers. So I don't, the point is they're trying to look at changing the schedule, moving up games a week ahead of time. I just don't want them to call it week 0. Just call it the opening weekend of college football. And they're also looking at trying to find a way to rediscover some opportunities in the month of December. To me, if there are 4 games, quarterfinal round games, I don't care when they're playing, I'm going to find them. Whether it's a team I like or a team I cover or just 8 other teams, I'm going to find that. That's important enough for me to watch the game. Playoff games in the NFL, there are some that to me are like, okay, I find them, I watch them, and I think the same thing would happen with the quarterfinal round games in college football. So that's from Ross Dellinger today. Much more if you want to go to si.com with that.